كيف تكفرون بالله كيف تكفرون بالله وكنتم أمواتا فأحياكم.
So be content with what Allah has decreed for you. Right? Be content with what Allah, the Exalted, has decreed for you. That apostrophe S shouldn't be there. So the point is that if you are in a state of death acceptance, it won't bother you. And accepting death is accepting the decree of Allah. Because Allah, like one sheikh told me once, he said, we're all on death row. We were in a gathering, and he said, we're all on death row. We're just waiting for the executioner to come. Right? Huh? Allahu Akbar. Right? I mean, we're all on death row. We've all been condemned to death. We're just waiting. Right? And so once you realize that, the one who condemned you to death was the one that gave you life in the first place, so you should be content. Because he's done it for a wisdom. There's a wisdom in it. And from another point of view, death is a celebration for the Muslim. Right? Death is a celebration for the Muslim. Like the man who said, Fustu bi Rabbil Kaaba. His death was Allahu Akbar. That's the end. Shaykh Ibn al-Habib radiallahu anhu said, Fil mawti alfu raha. In death, for the mu'min, there's 1,000 raha. Just repose. He said, in this world, as long as you're in this world, there's not a cell in your body that can't have pain and disease in it. Once you're out of this world, all of that ends. So there's a raha in death. Right? And another time he said that death, for the mu'min, was like going from the third class compartment to the first class compartment. Right? I mean, it's just the conductor comes and he tells you, no, you shouldn't be here, come up to first class. What do you say? No, I don't want to go, I like it here, I'll stay here in third class. You can say, oh, great. It's like when they get you on the airplane, sometimes they bump you up to first class. You're not upset about it, right? Alhamdulillah. So, that's it. For the mu'min, it's not a bad thing. Right? And that's why our mourning is only 3 days. I mean, I had a course called Death and Dying, and this professor said that one of the worst things about this country is the industry of mourning. And he said it's a disservice to people that there's this whole industry of mourning that goes around death and this idea of dragging on the mourning period. A lot of people will go into mourning for like years and they'll go to therapy and do all these things to get over. That's all love of dunya and connect to dunya. People of Allah, when you accept Allah and if Allah takes your beloved, khalas. Allah took that person. Allah took that child. Allah took, and it's painful. The Prophet ﷺ felt pain. He cried, but it's Allah who did it. And we have to be pleased with what Allah does, and that's why the mu'min is the one who's able to go through that. And another thing about the Muslims, which is amazing. No, as far as I know, definitely not the Europeans, but no people can deal with death like the Muslims do. And if you look at calamities and tribulations when they befall the Muslims, you see where the Muslims are at. And when you see the opposite happen to the non-Muslims, they're committing suicide, they fall apart. The Muslims are able to, because of that rabta, that strength with Allah and that connection that they have, a divine connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why they're able to do things that other people can't do. And that's why we're able to deal with death. And Maurice Bucaille, the French doctor, one of the things that he said that got him interested in Islam was how Algerians died in France compared to the French people. Right? He was so impressed with North Africans, the way they faced death. And if you've seen, because I've worked in on hospital wards where people were dying, and it's amazing. You see people in this culture, a lot of them they can't die. They don't know how to die. They don't have a clue. And if you watch a Muslim especially a devout Muslim, if you watch a devout Muslim he's been practicing for death his whole life, right? So when it comes, he's ready for it. And Sheikh Uthman Bashir Uthman, rahimahullah, who was a close friend of mine, he was in his early 80s, and he grew up in Eritrea, and he came to the U.S. actually, and I told him about Dar al-Islam, and he said, we have to go there. And he wanted me to go with him because he could only speak Arabic and Tekrur. And so we went, and then he went back to Medina, and he died right after that. And a couple of things. One of the things he told me that he knew he was going to die in Medina, because he told me his sheikh, when he was in Eritrea, when he was a young man, he told him there's going to be a lot of fitan in this country. There's going to be, the communists will take over, and you're going to have to flee. But Allah, inshallah, will open up a place for you in Medina, and you'll go live there, and you'll die there, and you're going to be buried in Baqiyah. He told me that. I heard that from his lips. And this is what they call kashf, which happens. Some of the people of Allah give them, it's not like a revelation. It's not revelation. It's just Allah give them a type of opening, and they see things, and they can tell people sometimes. And he told me he always thought his sheikh was just kind of saying nice words to him, and he said after he died, sure enough, communists took over. He was a wealthy businessman. He had to flee, and a place was open for him in Medina, and he ended up getting citizenship there, and he lived his whole life. He traveled all the time, and he told me, he said, I really feel, inshallah, I'm going to die in Medina. They took him back to Jeddah, and he was in the hospital there. And I have the card from Dr. Omar, told me everything, how he died. He was in the hospital in Jeddah, and he had cancer, and he was going to die, and he had almost no strength, and they had him hooked up to all this stuff, and then he was there for a while, and then one day he told his son, we have to go to Medina today. And the doctor said, no, he can't leave. And he said, no, I'm leaving today. They're going to drive me. My son will drive me, and I'm leaving the hospital. And his doctor was totally said, no, you're too sick, and you need to stay here. He said no. They took him that night. He went all the way back, got to Medina. He just said La ilaha illallah the whole night. Right before Fajr, he told his son to say a few things to certain people and this and that. And then he said the Shahada and died. And he was buried in Baqiyah. And the place he was buried, when they went in, he gave me a piece of from the road that covers Prophet ﷺ's grave, because they cut it up when they change it. And he gave me a piece of that. But he was buried with that. But the place that he was buried is right next to Imam Malik and Nafi', where people aren't buried anymore, because it's in the old Baqiyah. But when they came in, they found there was a dug grave there, and so they put him in that grave. But he was prayed on Yom al-Jum'ah. He was the only person that died that day, or that had janazah that day at the Prophet's mosque. So I'm just telling you that story because that is an example of how, Muslims who know how to die. Right? I mean, there's a story, Allahu a'lam of its truth, but it's a story told in Persia about Fariduddin al-Attar, who was a perfumer. And he actually tells a story, I think, that the way that he made his tawbah to Allah was a man once came begging for alms. And he told him, why don't you get a job? And he said, this is my job. And he said, what do you do? And he said, well, what do you do? He said, I sell perfumes. And he said, the most important thing that you're ever going to do is die. And he said, and I know how to do that. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu Muhammad Rasulullah, and he died. So there are people that do know how to die, And I mean, whether that story is true or not, there's a truth in it. Is it there? Yeah. I mean, there really is. There are people that know how to die. And when the time comes, they will know what to do. And there's other people that don't. And when the time comes, they go into a real state of confusion. So, and that's one of the blessings also of doing dhikr of death. And another thing that our scholars have recommended, and the Prophet ﷺ, based on his hadith of remembering death, is to go through the states of the akhirah, to actually go through visualization of dying, of being washed, of being wrapped, of being put into your grave, of having the dirt cover you, and then being asked by the angels, and then resurrection. Of actually going through the states and the mizan, to reflect on those things as a practice to do. It's a very sobering type of practice to do that, just to really get you out of the sleep that we're in life. Now, another thing he says here is that أما إذا قلاه لا لذاته ولا للانصرام عن لذاته بل خوف قطعه عن استعداده بطاعة الله إلى معاده. If he doesn't like death, not for its death, because it's death, nor because it's going to cut him off from the pleasures of dunya, but if he doesn't like it out of fear that he hasn't had enough time to prepare for death, then that's a good reason. And the Prophet ﷺ encouraged you to desire a long life, because he said, if you're a bad person, you have time to make up for the wrong you've done. And if you're a good person, you have more time to increase your good and to strengthen your sahifa, or your scroll on the Yawm al-Qiyamah. So we should have, and he mentioned that about Tul al-Amad, that it was good to desire, if you were in good deeds, it was a good thing to desire long life for that reason. And the Prophet ﷺ, about death, he once said to Aisha radiallahu anhu, "Man ahabba Allah, ahabba liqa'ahu." Whoever loves Allah loves to meet Allah. And she said, "Ya Rasulullah, al-maut, nakrah al-maut. We don't like death." And the Prophet ﷺ said, that was normal. That was a natural thing. But rather, it was a dislike of the akhirah, of meeting Allah. You see? So, the point is that the dislike of death is obviously natural. I mean, Allah's put it in our body. It's at a cellular level that you don't want to die, right? And that's why in certain instances where your life's threatened, you go into a hyper state of functioning, and you'll do things that are really not at the conscious level to protect yourself or others from death, right? So that is normal, and Allah has put that in us. That's a good thing, and that's why Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he said, "Ala ta'kulun," when he offered them the food, the angels, and they didn't eat, فَأَوْجَسَ مِنْهُمْ خِيفًا. He felt fear, and that fear was that they were going to rob him and kill him or something. So that's a natural thing, to have that. And that's not what he's talking about there. And then he says, أَوْ فَوَّضَ الْأَمْرَ إِلَى مَوْلَاهُ فَمَا يَشَاءَ أَرْضَاهُ أَوْ أَبْقَاهُ. If on the other hand, also, if he completely entrusted his affair to his master, and whatever he wills, either felling him or giving him respite, contents him. So, in other words, you don't mind. Whatever Allah wants to do with you, you're just content with that. That's fine. And so both those positions are good positions. And that's why he says, فَذَانِ مَمْدُحَانِ مَحْمُودَانِ وَالْكُرْهُ لَا يُبْعِدُ مِنْكَ الدَّانِ. He says that both those attitudes towards death are commendable and praiseworthy, and anyway, a dislike of the reality of death in no way distances from death's proximity. So even if you don't like death, it doesn't, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to make it any more distant from you. It's much better to accept it for your own state. And the other thing that's important about this is that he mentions it here. And then he says, ذَاكِرُهُ يُكْرَمُ بِالْقَنَاعَةِ وَبِنَشَاطِ قَلْبِهِ لِلطَّاعَةِ. The one who remembers death much, he's ennobled by certain characteristics. 4 things. One of them is qana'ah. Because of your remembrance of death, you tend to be more content with what you have. In other words, if you really think that you could die any time, there's going to be more of an impetus to enjoy the experience of life now, instead of always thinking, eventually I'm going to get it together, as they say in America. And that never happens, right? So the point is qana'ah, and this is the Prophet ﷺ said, al-qana'atu kanzun la yafna. Contentment is a treasure that is never exhausted. So qana'ah is really important. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Allahumma arzuq ala Muhammadan al-qana'a wal-kafaf. Oh Allah, give the family of my family, the family of the Prophet ﷺ, contentment and enough to live their lives with. So just give them enough to get by and then make them content with it. And that's why the qanu', a person who's in a state of qana'ah, he's the only wealthy person. So a poor man who's content is a rich man in reality. A rich man who's discontent is a poor man in reality. Because faqr is want. And qana'ah is you have no want. If you don't have want, you're rich. Because the definition of a rich person is that without need. So if you don't have need, you're wealthy. And that's why al-ghina, ghina nafs. The Prophet ﷺ said real wealth is the wealth of the soul. Right? Al-ghina laysa an kathrat al-ard. It's not having a lot of stuff. وَإِنَّمَا الْغِنَى غِنَى النَّفْسِ. It's the contentment of the soul. And so when you remember death, Allah, one of the blessings, He's telling you, this is a given. You are given qana'ah. And this is an age where there's so many false needs and wants that are inculcated in the hearts of people. I mean, that's what media is doing constantly. Just yaghrif, it's just planting the seeds of tama', of desire, of shahwa, of all these things in the heart. And then he says, it also will give you energy, right? His heart's activities directed towards obedience, right? So, by remembering death, it will give you a type of nishat. You become nishat, which is to be energized, to do good deeds, because if you think about death, then it's going to make you want to be more obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَبِبِدَارِ تَوْبَةٍ وَيُبْتَدَى. And then also the other thing that you're given is you're given a state where you'll hurry to tawbah. If something does occur, if a slip does happen and you do something wrong, it will cause you to quickly make tawbah, which is rectifying things. So tawbah rectifies wrong actions, and that's a gift of remembrance of death. Because if you do something wrong and then you say, subhanallah, I'm accountable for this, astaghfirullah, then it causes you to actually ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgiveness. Now, the opposite is true. The one who forgets his death, he's given those 3 opposites. He will always want more. He'll never have qana'ah. And he's also going to be يُرْسِلُ جَوَارِحَهُ فِي الْمَعَصِيَةِ. He'll do wrong actions because he's not worried about death. He's not thinking about death and the Yawm al-Qiyamah and the Hisab and these things. And then finally, he won't have remorse when he does things that are wrong because he's not really worried about what's going to happen in the Akhirah. Now, the next thing, this one really is one of the most important in the whole thing. Because shukr really is essential to the deen of Islam. And gratitude, and the meaning in Arabic for kafir, a kafir, one of the meanings is kufran al-ni'mah. And this is why a Muslim can be a kafir. Right? Because there's a kufr dun al-kufri. There's a kufr that's less than kufr. Right? And kufran and ni'mah, like one of the things the Prophet ﷺ warned women against was kufran and mu'ashara, being ungrateful for their spousal companionship. Right? If Allah gives them a husband and then they're ungrateful towards him. right? So they don't see that there's a blessing, there's a ni'mah in that. Protection, giving, taking care of the needs of the person, etc., etc. So, the next disease is called oblivion to blessings. من عيوب النفس نسيان النعم وأصله الغفلة وما بكم. That's an ayah in the Quran. وَمَا بِكُم مِّن نِعْمَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ. And there's no ni'mah that you have except that it's from Allah. So, in this culture they say you should count your blessings. Right? Count your blessings. And people that do that are actually quite rare. Because Allah says, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you count the blessings of Allah, enumerate them, you will never encompass them. So, just to go into this, one of the things, وَبِدَوَامِ ذِكْرِهَا, he's saying you should always remember that ayah. وَمَا بِكُم مِّن نِعْمَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ. Now, the Quran begins, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Some of the Mufassirun say that Rahman is the giver of Jala'id al-Ni'am, the big blessings. Rahman means al-Mun'im bi Jala'id al-Ni'am. And Rahim means al-Mun'im bi Daqa'iq al-Ni'am. Rahim means the giver of subtle blessings. In other words, Rahman, the blessings of the Rahman are easy, like health. It's obvious. If all you have to do is say somebody, oh, thank God you're healthy, and they say you're right, Alhamdulillah ala sahha wal afiyah. That's a obvious. Alhamdulillah ala al-iman. But then there's all these other blessings, daqa'iq al-ni'am. For instance, the blessing of the eye, the fact that the eye is lubricated. Now there's some people that have to have these Visine type things because they get dry eye. And what happens when your eyes are dry, you blink, what the blinking is doing is cleaning the eyes. Right? And it also protects it because you've got these eyelashes, and it's very fast. If you look, just a slight piece of hair gets into the eye, it's really troublesome. So Allah made this eye, you have this blinking that protects your eye from being harmed, and then He also put sockets in there, so the eye is slightly back in this, in the skull, right? In order to be protected from, blunt wounds and things like that, right? And people that don't get the, lacrimentation of the eye, they have to put drops in the eye because it hurts so much. Right? Or people that can't close their eyelids. Or people that lose their eyelids. There's actually people that lose their eyelids. So there's all these, and then just the eye itself. If you look at all the colors that the eye gives. So if you start looking at the body and realizing that the whole thing is all ni'am, the fact that you're balanced, because people that lose their ear, they get a disease in the ear because balance is actually part of it is related to the ear and the nerve in the ear. So if you have eighth ear damage, people actually start losing their balance and they can't stay up because they're not. So balance itself is a ni'mah from Allah. The fact that you actually, when you're standing, you're balanced. There's people that don't have that. Right? And then the way you eat, all of that is a ni'mah from Allah. The digestive juices that you're not even aware of that are going in, and then breakdown of the foods, and all the separation of all these things are hidden ni'am that are hidden from. We don't even think about it. The cerebellum and the whole way that the brain is working at a subconscious level. Breathing. You don't have to remember to breathe. Right? You don't have to do anything. These are all ni'am that Allah has given you, and oftentimes we're not even aware of it. Right? the thumb itself, right? The opposable thumb. Other animals can't do that. And Allah says, لَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي Adam, we ennobled Bani Adam. Some say it was that He gave us the thumb. And the word in Arabic for thumb is ibham, which is the strange thing. Mubham, it's a strange thing. Because other creatures don't have that. So the thumb is a big ni'mah of Allah, right? Alexander the Great used to cut off his enemies' thumbs, right? So they couldn't fight him again. Because you lose your thumb, you can't do anything. So, and then all the pleasure that Allah has given you, your taste buds. That's a ni'mah. Allah could have made your food rocks, and He could have made your water brackish. He says that in the Quran. He could have made your water brackish. It could have been horrible to taste, and you'd still have to drink it. But He made it sweet. He could have made all the foods taste the same. But He gave lemons for people like sour things, and honey for people like sweet. He gave all these different things. And then He gave you different taste buds to where you could actually enjoy the different things in it. So all of these, this idea of reflecting on the ni'am. One of the things the Imam al-Ghazali says, he said, look at your food. Allah says that in the Quran. فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِهِ إِنَّا صَبَبْنَا الْمَاءَ صَبًّا ثُمَّ شَقَقْنَا الْأَرْضَ شَقًّا. We brought down the rain, and then we split the earth. And you can see it when the rain reaches, and the seed, it says, اختلط به نبات الأرض. It mixes with the seeds of the earth. And then when it splits open, فارق الحب والنوى. Allah is the splitter. When Allah splits that open, it causes the earth to break forth. So Allah is doing all that. And so He tells, فَلْيَنْظُرَ الْإِنسَانِ, let a man look at his طعام, إِلَى طَعَامِ. إِنَّا صَبَبْنَا مَا صَبًّا ثُمَّ شَقَقْنَا الْأَرْضَ شَقًّا فَأَنْبَتْنَا بِهِ حَبًّا وَعِنَبًا وَقَضْبًا وَزَيْتُونًا. Right? All these things Allah has given. The inab, the grapes, the zaytun, olives, the dates, all of these things. The fodder, the animals eat, and we benefit from. Secondarily, right? It's in there. Abba. How we benefit from Abba. Benefited secondarily. They didn't know that then. The transformation of all that through meat, and the animals eat it, and then we eat the meat, and we get that secondarily. So that's Allah saying, look at those things, reflect on them, and realize that's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more you do that, then the less inclined you are to forget the ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you'll honor the ni'mah. And the importance for this cannot be underestimated. Why? Because He says here, وَذِكْرَ الْآيَةِ الْمُرْجِفَاتِ غَيْرِهَا. Remember the other ayahs that should put fear in your hearts. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah does not change the blessings of a people and turn them into the opposites until they change themselves by not showing Him gratitude for them. That's how that verse is interpreted by the scholars. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ. Allah gives you a ni'mah, and He won't take it away from you until you show ingratitude for it. Allah says, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَمْ يَكُنْ مُغَيِّرًا نِعْمَةً أَنْعَمَهَا عَلَى قَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. That is because Allah will not change the blessing that He has given a people until they change themselves through ingratitude. And the poet said, إِن كُنْتَ فِي نِعْمَةٍ فَرْعَاهَا إِنَّ الْمَعَاصِي تَزِيرُ النِّعَمِ. If you're in ni'mah, guard it, because disobedience takes away your ni'am. If you're disobedient to Allah, you lose your ni'am. And that's why Al-Waqi' when he was asked when he was young, when he was old, he could move so quickly, and somebody asked him the secret of that, and he said, تِلْكَ الْجَوَارِحْ حَفِظْنَاهَا لِلَّهِ فِي صِغْرِنَا فَحَفِظَهَا لَنَا فِي كِبْرِنَا. These are limbs that we guarded for Allah's sake when we were young, and so Allah has guarded them for our sake as we're old. So if you protect the ni'am that Allah has given you, then that's the way you maintain them. Right? Qaydun ni'am, they say qaydun ni'am ash-shukr. That keeping the ni'mah with you is gratitude. تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكَ لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. Allah has announced to us, He's told us, If you show gratitude for my ni'am, I will increase you in them. I'll give you more. Right? So oblivion to ni'am is a disaster. It's a disaster.